It was 1978, late summer, Western Pacific, east of the Mariana Trench. I remember the date because it was my daughter's birthday week, and I was not home. I was a Navy officer then, assigned to a small, deep work unit that did not exist on paper. We sailed under a testing label. That was never true. Our ship held position over a stretch of ocean that looked empty on every chart. No lanes, no traffic, just depth, 35,000 feet of it. At that depth, the sea is not moving the way sailors understand. It presses. It waits. I was calm that morning. I always was before a dive. Calm keeps you alive. The vehicle checks were clean, power steady, hull tight. We expected wreckage, a broken classified item that fell where it should not have. We were told to find it, tag it, and bring back what we could. On the first descent, the instruments began to disagree with each other by small amounts. Nothing enough to abort. Enough to notice. I wrote it down. I always did. When the bottom came into view, it was not a wreck. It was a place, and it looked used. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. I had been in the Navy for over a decade by then. Most of it was quiet work. Charts, pressure tables. Training meant to trust numbers more than instinct. I was not assigned to guns or raids. I worked around depth, around machines that went where people could not survive on their own. That kind of work attracts officers who do not talk much. You learn early that the ocean does not care about confidence. Our unit was small, fewer than 20 men, rotating depending on the task. Engineers, pilots, 2 medical officers, and a handful of support crew who knew how to keep their mouths shut. We reported to a chain that shifted depending on the mission. Sometimes Pacific Fleet, sometimes a desk in Washington that never returned calls. You stopped asking after a while. The mission briefing for that operation was thin. A classified object had been lost during a joint exercise months earlier. The explanation was clean. Equipment failure. Descent beyond control. Impact somewhere along the trench slope. Our job was recovery or confirmation of destruction. That was normal work for us. Nothing about the briefing suggested danger beyond pressure and distance. The ship we sailed on was an older support vessel, modified inside. From the outside, it looked like any other research ship. Inside, it held reinforced bays, winch systems, and a deep submergence vehicle rated beyond what most people believed possible at the time. That vehicle was our world during a dive. A steel sphere, controls worn smooth by gloves, and no room to stand. Once sealed, you accepted that the surface might as well be another planet. We reached station after several days at sea. The weather stayed calm, which felt wrong for that part of the Pacific. The water surface was flat, almost dull, no swell worth noting. The crew moved with routine ease, but there was an edge under it. Sailors feel deep water even if they cannot explain it. The sonar team started mapping long before we deployed, sending sound down into places light never reaches. The first thing that stood out was the seafloor shape. It did not match the older charts. That alone was not alarming. Trenches shift. Slides happen. But this was not a slide. The shelf we were looking at was wide and smooth, like it had been pressed down instead of broken apart. The sonar returns were clean where they should have been messy. Our mapping officer flagged it. The note went into a separate log. We launched the vehicle just after dawn. The pilot was a man named Harris, steady hands, quiet voice. I sat to his right, managing systems and recording readings. Another officer sat behind us, watching external feeds. As we descended, light faded the way it always does. Blue to gray to nothing. Time stretched. You stop thinking in minutes and start thinking in depth numbers. At around 20,000 feet, small issues began. Not failures, more like arguments. Depth gauges disagreed by a few feet, then corrected. Heading drifted, even though there was no current worth mentioning. The external camera showed drifting silt that moved sideways instead of settling. I logged everything. Harris glanced at me once, then kept his eyes forward. By the time we reached the bottom, the vehicle lights cut into a flat expanse. No debris field, no scattered wreckage. Just ground that looked worked, lines that ran too straight, edges that met at clean angles. It took a few seconds for my mind to accept what my eyes were seeing. Natural terrain does not look like that, not at that depth. We moved forward slowly, thrusters low. Every foot mattered. The seafloor showed long scrape marks, parallel, evenly spaced. Something heavy had rested there. Something that had been moved on purpose. I remember feeling a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with air. This was not in the briefing. Then the camera caught something that made the cabin go quiet. A metal object, half buried, reflecting our light back in a dull way. Harris eased us closer. It was not the classified item we were sent for. It was a tool. Bent, scarred, human-made, and it did not belong 35,000 feet under the Pacific. That was the moment I understood we were late. We stayed on the bottom longer than planned. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. You do not find human tools at that depth by accident. Harris kept the vehicle steady while I marked the position and took still frames. The light showed more than I wanted. There were shallow cuts in the ground around the tool, like someone had worked there in a careful way, not rushed, not panicked. That meant time. Time is the one thing you do not have that far down. When we returned to the surface, the deck crew acted normal, but the officers did not. Our tapes were taken right away. Logs copied. Questions asked out of order. I answered only what I knew for certain. That habit had kept me safe before. It did not calm anyone. We were told to stand by for another dive the next day. That night, I reviewed the sonar maps again. The smooth shelf extended farther than expected. At its center was a darker return, almost like a shadow that sound did not want to fill. I had seen odd returns before, but this one stayed the same no matter the angle. It was not empty space. It was something that swallowed the signal. I did not sleep much. The second dive confirmed it. We approached the shadow slowly, lights cutting a narrow path. As we closed in, the ground changed texture. The smooth surface gave way to something that looked layered, like plates fitted together. Not rock. Not metal either, at least not like any hull I knew. The edges met without gaps. There was no debris pile, no rubble. Whatever this was, it had not crashed. We found the object from the briefing a short distance away. It was smaller than expected, split open along one side. The interior was empty. No damage pattern that matched an impact. It looked placed, not lost. Harris said nothing, but his hands tightened on the controls. I noted the position and realized the truth was already clear. This object had been brought down here after it was opened somewhere else. Back on the surface, a helicopter arrived without warning. A new officer came aboard with sealed orders and no interest in introductions. He wore no unit patch. His questions were narrow and sharp. He did not ask what we felt or thought. He asked what we saw, what we recorded, and what we had not recorded. He knew about the tool before we mentioned it. That told me enough. Our orders changed. Recovery was no longer the priority. Observation was. We were to map, photograph, and mark specific points along the shelf. Certain angles. Certain distances. The coordinates matched the dark return I had been studying. No one explained why. They did not have to. In the Navy, silence is often the explanation. Over the next 2 days, we made repeated dives. Each time, the place revealed a little more. The structure extended into the seafloor at a shallow angle, like an entrance that had been sealed and reopened more than once. The plates showed wear in patterns that repeated. Something had gone in and out. Not recently, but not ancient either. On the fourth dive, we found a marker line. Thin, modern, anchored deep into a seam between plates. It was frayed near the end, cut clean. Attached to it was a stamp tag with a serial number format I recognized. It belonged to a Navy supply system from years earlier. I remembered seeing that format during training on the West Coast. The name tied to that tag surfaced in my mind without effort. A man listed as reassigned after a training accident. No body recovered. No public report. That was when the weight settled in my gut. This was not a first contact with the place. It was a return. Small things began to change after that. The vehicle drifted even when thrusters held steady. The silt lifted in slow sheets, not stirred by us, moving like it followed a slope we could not see. Condensation formed inside the cabin faster than expected, droplets sliding down the steel and falling onto panels in a steady rhythm. The lights showed a faint green tone at the edge of their reach, not bright enough to explain, not dark enough to ignore. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, too many hours watching the same shadows. That explanation worked until the instruments stopped arguing and started agreeing in the wrong direction. Depth, heading, and distance all shifted together, as if something outside the vehicle was setting the rules. On the surface, the new officer approved everything. He watched the feeds with interest, not concern. When Harris suggested we had enough data, the officer shook his head. He said we were close to the reason we were sent. That phrase stayed with me, not the mission. The reason. On the final dive of that phase, the shadow opened. The opening did not appear all at once. It showed itself the way deep things often do, by changing what was around it. The silt stopped drifting and began to pull inward, slow and steady, like it was sliding down a shallow bowl. Our lights caught the edges of that movement first, thin lines where the ground no longer lay flat. Harris eased the vehicle forward without being told. At that point, we were all thinking the same thing. The structure had separated along a seam we had passed over before. Plates that once looked fused now showed a narrow gap. Not wide enough for the vehicle, but wide enough to see into. The inside swallowed our light. The green glow thickened there, not brighter, just closer. Like it had weight. I felt pressure in my ears even though the cabin systems showed no change. My hands rested on the console longer than needed, just to feel something solid. We held position and recorded. That was the order. Observe. Do not disturb. The problem was that the place did not seem interested in being only observed. The vehicle began to yaw a few degrees to port. Harris corrected. The correction did not take. He tried again, adding power. The thrusters responded, but the movement stayed slow, like pushing against something thick that did not show itself. I checked the readings. Power draw normal, no faults, no alarms. The depth held steady, but the sense of motion did not match the numbers. That is hard to explain to someone who has never been down there. You learn to trust the body as much as the gauges. When the two disagree, you pay attention. The opening widened another foot, just enough to reveal a surface inside that did not look like rock. It was smooth, dull, and marked with shallow lines that curved instead of running straight. They did not repeat in a pattern I could follow. The camera struggled to focus, not because of distance, but because the surface did not give clear edges. Harris muttered once, low, more to himself than to us. Behind us, the third officer shifted in his seat. I could hear his breathing through the intercom, steady but heavier than before. No one spoke. Words felt like they would break something. Then we saw the first object move. It was small, about the size of a helmet. It slid out of the opening and stopped just beyond it, resting on the seafloor without raising silt. Our lights washed over it. It looked wrong in a simple way. Not strange shapes or sharp edges, just wrong material. It did not reflect like metal or absorb like stone. It held the light and bent it slightly, enough to make the edges blur. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to breathe slowly. Training took over. Fear is something you manage, not something you wait to pass. Harris nudged the vehicle back a few feet. The object did not follow. It stayed where it was, angled toward us in a way that suggested attention without movement. I logged the time. I logged the position. My hand shook just once. I corrected and kept writing. A voice crackled in our headsets. The new officer from the surface. He asked for a status update. His tone was calm, almost pleased. Harris described the opening, the object, the control resistance. There was a pause after that, long enough to feel intentional. The officer told us to hold position and continue recording. He asked specifically about the green light, whether it was stronger inside the opening. I did not like that he asked before we volunteered the detail. That meant he expected it, or he remembered it. The object near the opening shifted slightly. Not toward us, sideways. It rotated in place without disturbing the ground. The movement was slow, careful, like something being tested. Harris pulled us back another few feet. This time, the vehicle responded as expected. The thick resistance eased, then returned as we stopped. Condensation began to build faster inside the cabin. Droplets formed along the upper curve of the hull and slid down in uneven paths. One fell onto the back of my hand. Cold. Much colder than it should have been. The temperature gauge flickered and settled 1 degree lower. Not dangerous, not normal either. The opening pulsed, that is the closest word I have for it. The seam widened and narrowed by inches, like it was breathing. I remember thinking of pressure doors on submarines, cycling to equalize. The thought did not comfort me. The officer's voice returned. He told us the next phase would require a closer approach. He used the word entry, then corrected himself and said, inspection. The difference mattered. Entry means commitment. Inspection still pretends you can leave without consequence, Harris argued. He kept it professional. He cited vehicle limits, unknown forces, crew safety. The officer listened and then overrode him. He said the data we were seeing matched prior expectations. That phrase landed hard. Prior expectations meant this had happened before, not theory, experience. We were told to mark the opening and prepare for a follow-up dive within the same watch cycle. No rest, no long review. Just surface, swap recording media, and go back down. As we backed away, the object near the opening slid back inside. The scene closed behind it. The shelf returned to stillness. The silt drifted again, slow and sideways, as if nothing had happened. On ascent, none of us spoke. The climb felt longer than usual. My head ached in a way pressure does not cause. When we broke surface, the deck lights were already on, even though it was still day. Men I did not recognize waited near the recovery cradle. Their faces were calm. Too calm. As the hatch opened, warm air rushed in. It should have felt good. It did not. I knew then that the next dive would not be about observation. It would be about crossing a line we could not uncross. We had less than 3 hours before the next descent. That is not enough time at those depths. The body needs rest, even if the machine does not. No one asked how we felt. Food was brought to us, eaten without taste. I washed my hands and noticed they were still cold, even in warm air. I rubbed them together until feeling returned. The new officer joined us in the control space. He stood behind Harris during the checks, watching every switch. He did not touch anything. He did not need to. He spoke quietly and with certainty, like a man confirming a memory instead of planning an action. He told us the opening would respond to proximity. He said we should not be alarmed if the vehicle felt resistance again. He called it environmental interaction. I asked him how he knew. He looked at me for a long second, then said experience. That was all. The second descent felt heavier. Same numbers, same rate, but the cabin seemed smaller. The condensation returned faster, beads forming before we reached the bottom. The green glow appeared earlier this time, faint at first, then steady. It hovered just beyond the lights, never crossing into full view. I logged it anyway, knowing the log might never be seen again. When the seafloor came into view, the opening was already there, wider than before. Waiting is the wrong word, but it felt close. The silt no longer drifted. It hung in place, suspended, as if held by something we could not see. Harris slowed us to the lowest safe speed. Every movement felt watched, not by eyes, but by response. We approached until the vehicle's nose was just short of the seam. The resistance returned, thick and even. Thrusters pushed, and the vehicle crept forward inch by inch. Inside the opening, the green glow showed depth now, not a flat surface. A corridor. It sloped downward at an angle that did not match the shelf. I checked the inclinometer twice. It disagreed with what my eyes told me. The officer ordered us to extend the camera arm. That was a mistake. The arm moved forward and vanished into the glow. The video feed warped, not with static, but with delay. The image lagged behind the movement by a fraction of a second. Then the feed froze. Power draw spiked and settled. The arm stopped responding. Harris pulled back. The arm did not come with us. It stayed, fixed in place, like it had been set into something solid. The officer told us to hold position. His voice was steady, too steady. He said this was expected. A shape moved inside the corridor, larger than the first object we saw. It did not rush. It did not reach out. It adjusted the space around it. The green glow bent, thinning near us, thickening behind it. I could not tell where it ended. That scared me more than if it had a clear outline. Then something else came into view. Human-made. A suit panel, crushed flat, wedged into the corridor wall. I recognized the design immediately. Old Navy deep suit. Retired years before our mission. Scratches covered the surface. Not random. Lines cut deep by a tool or a gloved hand. Letters formed a name. The last letter trailed off where the metal bent inward. The name matched the supply tag from the marker line. My stomach tightened. This was not an unknown hazard. This was a known loss that had been buried. Someone had gone inside and never come back. Someone had left a record where only another diver would see it. The officer broke the silence. He ordered us to proceed another few feet. He said the interior pressure field would stabilize. Harris refused. Flat, professional. He said the vehicle could not guarantee exit if we crossed that threshold. The officer reminded him of duty, of orders, of consequences. I watched the corridor react to our argument. The green glow pulsed, stronger now. The resistance shifted, pushing us sideways instead of back. The suspended silt began to rise, not in clouds, but in sheets, sliding upward along the corridor walls. Condensation inside the cabin fell faster, tapping against panels in uneven rhythm. I realized the place was not passive. It responded to intent, to proximity, to pressure, not just physical but human. Harris made a choice. He cut power to the forward thrusters and dumped ballast we could afford to lose. The vehicle lurched back hard. The camera arm tore free with a sharp drop in power draw. The feed snapped back, then went dark. The corridor narrowed as we retreated, the seam closing faster than before. For a moment, the resistance increased, like something holding on. Then it released. The vehicle shot backward more than intended. Harris corrected, fighting to keep us from striking the shelf. The green glow faded to the edge of the lights. The silt settled again, slow and sideways, pretending nothing had happened. The officer did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply said, "We would discuss this on the surface." His voice held disappointment, not anger. That frightened me more than yelling would have. On ascent, the vehicle behaved oddly. Depth dropped faster than commanded, then slowed on its own. It felt like being let go in stages. At around 15,000 feet, everything returned to normal. Gauges aligned. Resistance vanished. The cabin warmed slightly. The condensation eased. When we surfaced, the deck was not waiting. No rush. No questions. We were told to secure the vehicle and stand by. Hours passed, then days. The officer left without saying goodbye. Our logs were returned with sections missing. Crew assignments changed overnight. Harris was reassigned within the week. I stayed. I kept my mouth shut. That is how you survive a career like that. But I knew then what the next phase would be. They would not stop. They never do. Places like that do not get ignored once found. They get studied, used, and eventually someone tries to open them fully. And when they do, there will be another crew sent down, told just enough to go and not enough to come back clean. After the last dive, we were no longer treated like operators. We were treated like a risk. Our access tightened. Escorts appeared where there had been none. Conversations stopped when we entered a room. That change told me more than any briefing ever could. Whatever was down there, it was not just strange. It was valuable. 2 days later, a new directive came in. Not from the officer who had pushed us toward entry, from higher. The wording was careful and dry. We were to assist a different team arriving within the week. A team with specialized equipment and a different mandate. Our role would be advisory only. That word sounded safe. It was not. The new ship arrived at night, larger, newer. No markings beyond a hull number that did not match public records. Its crew did not mingle. They brought their own submergence vehicle, sleeker than ours, built for penetration, not observation. I recognized the design approach immediately. Someone had learned from earlier losses. I was called aboard their ship for a briefing. The room was windowless. The charts on the table showed the shelf, the opening, and something else that had not been on our maps. The structure extended far beyond what we had seen, branching inward. The dark return I had logged was only the entrance to a larger interior. They knew the scale. That meant long-term study, long-term presence. One of their engineers spoke plainly. He said the environment inside did not behave like open water. He said it altered buoyancy and orientation in ways their models could not fully predict. He said they believed it was a controlled space, not a natural one. No one challenged him. That told me consensus had already been reached. Then came the twist that settled everything in my mind. They showed us footage. Not from our dives, from years earlier. Grainy, old. A different vehicle, different crew. The same opening, smaller then. The same green glow, fainter. The footage ended with a sudden loss of feed. No recovery shown. Just a timestamp and a file closure. The date matched the reassignment notice tied to the name scratched into the crush suit. This was not a discovery. It was a return after failure. I asked why we were being brought back in if they already had data. The answer was simple. The place had changed. The opening responded faster now. The interior signals were stronger. Something inside was active in cycles they did not yet understand. They believed our presence had accelerated it. That was the part that stayed with me. We had not just found something. We had interacted with it enough to matter. The plan was to place a device inside the structure. They did not call it a weapon. They did not call it a sensor either. They called it a stabilizer. A tool meant to reduce environmental response. The logic was thin, but the confidence was absolute. They believed the structure reacted because it lacked reference. The device would provide one. I recognized the thinking. Engineers hate unknowns. They try to pin them down. The ocean does not respond well to that mindset. Our role was to guide the approach, to share what we knew about the resistance, the drift, the way the place reacted to intent. I told them everything that mattered. I told them what happened when we pushed. I told them about the suit panel, about the name, about the way the place let us go only after we retreated far enough. They listened. Then they proceeded as planned. The new vehicle descended with confidence. Its systems handled the resistance better at first. The opening widened as it approached, almost welcoming. The green glow brightened, no longer held at the edge of the lights. Inside, the corridor showed more detail than before. Curved surfaces, intersections, depth that suggested layers. The stabilizer was deployed near the inner threshold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything did. The suspended silt lifted at once, filling the corridor like a rising wall. The glow surged, not outward but inward, collapsing toward the device. The vehicle's telemetry spiked across every channel. Orientation failed. Distance readings contradicted each other wildly. The feed lagged, then jumped ahead, showing positions the vehicle had not yet reached. I watched from the surface, hands clenched, knowing that distance meant nothing if the place decided otherwise. The vehicle tried to back out. The resistance doubled, then tripled. The stabilizer began to vibrate not from motion, but from interaction. The structure around it flexed. Plates shifted. Seams opened deeper inside, revealing spaces the lights could not fill. A shade moved within those spaces. Not one, several. They did not rush. They adjusted the environment around the vehicle, shaping the corridor to narrow behind it while widening ahead. That is when I understood the truth we had all avoided. The structure was not a door. It was a system. The vehicle lost contact seconds later. Not a sharp break, a fading. Signals dropped one by one, like something deciding what to allow through. The last feed showed the stabilizer pressed flat against a surface that had not been there before, as if the interior had reconfigured itself around it. Silence followed. No alarms. No explosion. Just absence. On deck, no one spoke. Orders came down quickly. Secure all data. Cease operations. Prepare to depart. The official explanation would be equipment malfunction. Deep water loss. Tragic, but expected. That night, as the ship separated and we turned away from the trench, I stood on deck and looked at calm water that hid everything beneath it. I knew then that the place did not act in defense. It acted in correction. We had introduced something it did not want, and it had removed it. More troubling was what came next. In the days after, internal messages hinted that the loss was acceptable, that the response confirmed theories, that future designs would account for the behavior observed. They were already planning to go back. That was the midpoint for me. The moment I stopped thinking of the place as a mystery and started thinking of it as a boundary, one we were pressing against without understanding the cost. And I knew with a certainty I could not explain that the next attempt would not end with simple silence. They did not wait long before trying again. That was the part that confirmed everything I feared. Loss did not slow them down. It refined them. Within weeks, new plans circulated through channels I was never meant to see but did anyway. I had been around long enough to recognize the signs. When language becomes cleaner after a failure, it means the decision has already been made. This time, they wanted us back inside, not advisors, not observers. Inside, the reasoning was simple and dangerous. The place reacted more strongly to machines alone. Human presence, they believed, added unpredictability, but also leverage. Judgment, adaptation. They wanted eyes inside the structure again. They wanted people who had already been there and survived. Harris was gone, reassigned to a desk job far from the ocean. I was still in place. That alone should have warned me. Instead, I accepted the orders the way officers do when refusal feels like betrayal of something larger, even when that something is poorly defined. We returned to station under a different cover, different ship, different name, same water. The trench looked no different from the surface. Calm, empty. That made it worse. Calm hides depth. The vehicle was modified. Extra power reserves. Reinforced forward section. Internal ballast controls that allowed faster shedding in an emergency. Someone had thought hard about escape. Someone else had accepted that escape might not be possible. The descent began before sunrise. I sat in the same position I always had, hands on familiar controls that felt foreign now. The pilot was new to me, younger but skilled. He trusted the machine. I trusted experience. Between the two of us, we hoped that was enough. The green glow appeared before we reached 20,000 feet, earlier than ever before. That told me the place was not dormant. It was aware of approach. I did not say that out loud. Saying it gives it weight. As we reached the shelf, the opening was already wide. No seam, no slow reveal. It was simply there, like a mouth held open without strain. The silt did not drift. It did not hang. It was gone, cleared away as if the ground had been swept clean. We moved forward under minimal power. There was no resistance this time. That was worse than fighting it. The vehicle slid smoothly, almost guided, until the nose crossed the threshold. The moment we entered, every sense argued with the others. The gauges showed steady depth, but my body felt like we were falling sideways. The corridor curved gently, but distance compressed in a way that made it feel short and endless at the same time. The green glow filled the space without a source. It did not come from walls or ceiling. It simply existed. The pilot slowed, then stopped. He asked if I was seeing what he was seeing. I said yes. That was all that needed to be said. Inside, the structure opened into a wider chamber. Surfaces rose and fell in smooth arcs. No sharp edges, no debris. Along one side were objects arranged in a line. Human objects, tools, panels, pieces of vehicles from different eras, all damaged but placed carefully, not scattered, like records. At the center of the chamber was a flat surface that reflected nothing. It absorbed the glow around it, creating a dark shape without edges. As we approached, the vehicle began to drift toward it, slow and steady, without thruster input. The pilot tried to counter. The controls responded, but the movement continued. I realized then that this was not a trap in the way people imagine traps. There was no snap, no sudden closure. It was correction. We were out of alignment and the system was adjusting us. The pilot's breathing grew heavier. I told him to slow it down. Calm keeps you alive. He nodded and focused. We dumped a small amount of ballast. The drift slowed but did not stop. The dark surface shifted, not moving closer, but expanding, like it was meeting us halfway. The green glow dimmed near it, creating a gradient that pulled the eye inward. I felt pressure behind my eyes, sharp and brief, then gone. The gauges showed nothing. Then the surface changed. A shape emerged from it, not rising, but resolving, like something coming into focus. It was not a creature. It did not have limbs or features that fit words. It was a structure within a structure, layered, moving in ways that suggested function rather than intent. Around it, the space adjusted, widening where it passed, narrowing behind. The pilot whispered my name. That broke the rule of silence we had kept. I answered. I told him to prepare to dump all remaining ballast on my mark. The thing did not approach us directly. It moved around the vehicle, close enough that the glow bent along its outline. Instruments spiked and settled. The hull creaked once, low and deep, like a reminder of weight. I saw something on the far side of the chamber that made my chest tighten. Another suit panel. Less damaged than the first. The name scratched into it was different. Newer, someone from the later team. Not the footage loss. Another attempt. Another burial. That was when the system changed behavior. The drift reversed. Instead of pulling us inward, it pushed us toward a narrow passage opening behind the chamber. Not the way we came in. A different route. The pilot fought it. I told him to stop. Fighting had not helped anyone before us. We were guided into the passage, faster now. The walls moved closer, not crushing, but firm, shaping our path. The green glow intensified, filling every gap. The whole temperature dropped. Condensation fell in sheets, striking panels and pooling at our feet. The pilot asked if we were going to die. I told him I did not know. I told him to be ready. The passage curved sharply, then straightened. Ahead, I saw light that was not green. A dull gray, open water. The pressure increased suddenly, not outside. Inside the cabin. My ears rang. The gauges jumped, then stabilized at a depth reading that made no sense. We were no longer at the shelf. We were deeper, and whatever controlled this place had decided to move us. The depth reading kept changing, but not in jumps. It slid downward, like a decision being made. The number passed anything our vehicle was rated for, then kept going. No alarm sounded. That was the worst part. The system did not see danger because the pressure outside was being managed for us. The passage opened without warning. We were no longer between walls. We were suspended in a wide space that felt larger than the chamber before it. The green glow faded to a thin haze, pushed aside by a dim gray light that had no clear source. The water here did not behave like water. It held us in place without drift or fall. The pilot tried the thrusters. They worked, but movement felt delayed, like the space itself needed time to accept the command. I told him to stop fighting again. He listened. That may have saved us. Below us, the structure continued. Not as walls or rooms, but as layers stacked downward, each one slightly offset from the last. Between those layers moved slow changes, like adjustments being made over time instead of moments. I understood then that this place was not reacting just to us. It was responding to a pattern, to repeated intrusion. Something shifted beneath the vehicle. Not rising, aligning. The pressure behind my eyes returned, stronger this time. Images came without sound or words. Not memories, records. Shapes of machines, entering and failing. Human forms struggling where they should not exist. Each attempt ending not in violence, but removal, correction. We were not enemies, we were errors. The vehicle began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. The depth reading climbed back toward familiar numbers. The gray light faded. The green glow returned briefly, then fell away, like a curtain being pulled back. The passage closed behind us. Not sealed. Finished. We broke free of the shelf without resistance. The silt returned. The ground looked flat again. Empty. Ordinary. If I had seen it fresh, I would have believed nothing was there. As we ascended, systems returned to normal one by one. The cabin warmed. Condensation slowed, then stopped. By 15,000 feet, it felt like any other dive. When we surfaced, the deck was quiet. Too quiet. Men I did not know secured the vehicle without speaking. Our logs were taken before I could finish writing. The pilot was led away for medical checks. I never saw him again. No report was filed under my name. The mission was listed as aborted due to equipment limits. The trench site was reclassified under a broader zone label. The program shifted focus. I was transferred within the month. They did not go back while I was still in uniform. At least not officially, but I know they will again. Places like that do not stay untouched forever. And systems that correct errors do not forget patterns. They remember. After that dive, my career changed shape without anyone saying the words out loud. I was still in uniform, still reporting for duty, but the kind of work I was given shifted. No more deep assignments. No more projects that touched the edge of what was unknown. I was placed in roles that kept me busy and far from decision points. Paper, training, oversight. Safe word for a man who had seen too much. Medical evaluations followed. Quiet ones. No records shared with me. I passed them all. That almost worried me more than failing would have. The pilot from that last dive never returned to the unit. I asked once. I was told he had been reassigned for health reasons. The tone made it clear the subject was closed. No official debrief ever asked what the place felt like. They asked what the instruments showed, what the vehicle did, what failed. I answered those questions honestly. I left out what could not be measured. That choice stayed with me longer than the dive itself. Over time, fragments reached me through informal channels. Funding lines redirected. Equipment designs adjusted to handle nonlinear environments. Language changed. The trench was no longer referenced by coordinates. It was given a designation, like a facility instead of a location. I understood then that the lesson they took was not caution. It was strategy. They believed the system below could be studied, mapped, maybe even learned from. They did not see it as a boundary. They saw it as an obstacle that had not yet been solved. I carried the memory quietly. Family, retirement plans, normal life on the surface. The ocean faded into the background for everyone else. It never did for me. I retired years later with full honors and no explanations. That is how it usually ends. Files stay sealed. Names fade. What matters gets buried under routine and time. I told myself that silence was part of service, that some things stay hidden because the world is not ready for them. Then, after retirement, I saw a notice that broke that belief. A funding release, public but vague. Deep ocean infrastructure research, Pacific focus. Language that mirrored the old documents too closely to be coincidence. New vehicles rated for depths they should not need to reach. New terms for environments that resist standard physics. The pattern was clear to anyone who had lived it. They were going back. I realized then that staying quiet no longer protected anyone. It only protected the process that treated men as tools and called loss acceptable. The place under the trench does not act with anger or hunger. It corrects. It removes what does not belong. Every attempt teaches it more about us, not the other way around. I'm an old man now. My hands shake sometimes. My sleep is light. But my memory is clear. What we found was not a threat waiting to rise. It was a boundary holding its ground. We crossed it enough times for it to learn our shape, our machines, our intent. If someone reads this before another crew is sent down, then this confession has done its duty. Because some depths are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to be left alone. I did not tell this story to warn about monsters or hidden worlds. That is not how the ocean works. What waits down there does not dream of the surface. It does not plan. It does not watch us out of curiosity. It responds when pushed, the way pressure responds to weakness. I think about that place more than I admit. Not every day, but often enough. It comes back in quiet moments, when the house is still, when the sea appears on the news, when a new ship launch is mentioned without detail. I remember how calm it felt when the system decided to let us go. Not mercy, not chance. Decision. What stays with me most is not fear. It is the order of it. The way everything down there had a role, a limit. We were the only part that did not fit. We arrived with noise and force and questions that demanded answers. The system answered in the only way it needed to. I served my country with pride. I still do. But service does not mean blind acceptance. It means knowing when something has crossed from duty into denial. The ocean has limits we pretend are challenges. Some are not meant to be solved. They are meant to remain. I do not know how many sites like that exist. I do not know if they are connected. I only know this one corrected every mistake made in its presence, quietly and completely. It left no room for hero stories, only records. If another crew goes down, they will be told what we were told. Enough to move forward. Not enough to understand. They will trust their machines. They will trust their orders. And they will trust that the ocean behaves the same everywhere. It does not. I am telling this now because I am done carrying it alone. Not for attention, not for recognition. Just to put the truth somewhere it cannot be sealed. Some depths are not empty. Some systems do not want us inside. And once they learn us, they do not forget. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the ones showing right now on your screen.